So we're going to go ahead and get started with some introductions of our ADOR team that have joined us today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Craig.
Thank you, Megan. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Craig, I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Craig McPike with the Arizona Department of Revenue. I have recently joined the department and am working in the General Counsel's office along with Sheen Pai and the rest of the great team that we have here at the Department of Revenue. And we are really looking forward to helping your charitable organizations that you represent really maximize the effectiveness of your operations by providing guidance that is as clear as we can possibly under the current statutory framework, under the current laws as they exist. And as many of you know, we are interpreting law, the statutes that exist, but we cannot change what the statute says, even for good reason. So there are some things that may come up that we will refer to and references. These are awaiting legislative changes. And we're always happy to review any proposed legislation that anyone may want to put forth. So I just want to put that out there just from the outset to sort of frame this up. We're doing, working collaboratively with Brandy. She's been fantastic working with us and helping to get these things put together, some of these issues ironed out. And with that, I will turn it over to Elaine Smith.
Hey everyone, my name is Elaine Smith. I am with the Office of Economic Research and Analysis, and I have been working on and off on the QCO certification since 2009. As you all know, we've had a number of staff members work on this. I have been one of the constants. I'm happy to be here today and happy to hear from you all. And turn it over next to Rory.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rory Wilson helped Elaine and the QCO team for several years, and just here to listen and provide any support I can. I work in tax policy with a focus in income tax. And I don't know who else to turn it over to, Elaine. Do you
Alejandra?
My name is Alejandra Garcia. I am the new program manager. I have been here for about a month. I'm here to listen and answer any questions to the best of my abilities. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all for the introductions. And I'm sure we have some awesome folks joining us from the industry today. But in a matter of respect for timing, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. And Craig or Elaine, I'm not sure who's leading us through this listening session today, but I've got everything up that we need. So you just let me know where you need me to navigate, and we'll get some thoughts from the industry today.
Thank you, Megan. This is Craig again. So as you know, as we've been working on these draft guidelines, and the previous draft that was issued, I believe it was in May, and then we pulled back in June, recognizing that there was more work that needed to be done. And we have been, working on these issues, and we believe that we've come up with some more clarity and guidance. What we want to do is just, talk about very briefly the overall layout of the guidelines. We have the eligible population discussion, and then we go into the qualified services and the financials, and those are really the main key points of this. And as we go through this, we would like to break out the feedback from you all into those constituent parts, if you will. So if we could talk about eligible populations first. So any questions or comments you may have with respect to eligible populations, that will be the first portion of these sessions. And then moving on, once we've got all the feedback there and kind of talked through some things and we've taken our notes, then we'll move on to qualified services and so on and so forth with the financials. And Elaine, do you have anything to add there?
I don't, but Megan, maybe as you are, if you wouldn't mind paging forward a little bit to the eligible population, just to give people a refresher. Yeah, there's the eligible populations. Give folks just a moment. And then, or maybe we can leave it right there for now. And then if folks would like to have an opportunity to ask us questions or give us any comments, now that we have that up for public viewing, this would be the opportunity to start the comment period, I think.
So feel free to jump in, anyone, by raising your hand, as Megan had described, which is, it should be the lower toolbar on your screen. And once you raise your hand, then we can unmute you and you can ask questions or make comments as appropriate, as you deem appropriate.
Well, if there are no comments at this point about the eligible populations, I would guess we could move on to the services. And of course, if anyone thinks of something later, we could certainly come back. Catherine, are there changes to the section since the last time we published? Is that what you're asking in the chat? So if we are talking about the population, I think that for the population, the only thing that we might have cleaned up some, yeah, Craig, I'll let you describe some of the edits that you made. But I don't believe that there's any substantive changes to the eligible population narrative from what we had released in the spring.
Yes, that's a good point. What I'm going to do is pull up my notes version as I was making these changes.
Craig did a lot of cleanup, grammar and things like that, and certainly making it better. But I don't know that we had much in the way of changes in the population.
Yeah, I think that's correct. A lot of it was fleshing out. A lot of the changes were simply fleshing out what was the concepts at play and making it, trying to provide more clear-cut answers. I mean, some of the key fundamentals of good, sound tax policy are, clarity, consistency, fairness, equity, and one of our goals with revamping these guidelines was to really try to level out the playing field and make things as clear as we possibly can. Unfortunately, things aren't always crystal clear under the law, and that's again that could be where maybe any issues that you all have we may want to take it to the legislature. We can work with you on that, reviewing any legislation that you may want to propose if you do. But otherwise, I don't think there were substantive changes in this section.
Okay, so maybe we can move along to the qualifying services, and as we're doing that, I'll just take a look.
One thing I think that we did add care coordination services. It's a description about care coordination services under the medical care heading or subheading.
Okay.
And also another change, just to point out quickly, is in terms of food under number 4. Food can include snacks or refreshments.
Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest changes in food, because we definitely heard that comment before. We got a lot of comments about snacks. So there has been a minor change to that.
So anyone, thank you for your comment, Catherine, about highlighting any changes. Sort of skimming back through to pick out the more salient points. The value under number 9, services that do not qualify. value of donated goods distributed or in-kind services provided, even though they're basic needs. Exact language, but and that provision is, we recognize that the maybe from an accounting perspective or for a federal 990 reporting perspective, those things may be counted in the program services calculations. But because we're dealing with a tax credit and it's pursuant to Arizona law and we're working within that framework, we don't want to penalize organizations for the amounts donated or the services that you are donating out to other organizations or to folks at no cost, or the value of the donated goods that you're distributing. We don't want to hold that against any organization, but we also don't feel that it's appropriate under the current law to include that in the 50% support test. So we are excluding all of those amounts from both the numerator and the denominator. So that at the end of the day, you're not penalized, but you're also not benefited from it. It's just a non-issue from that perspective.
I would like to say that is something that we have been doing for some time. We just didn't say it very well in the last version of these guidelines. And so Craig has helped us say it better. Are there any comments about services in general, or including those that we are showing do not qualify? Oh, wait, I see Melissa has her hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So interesting, and I didn't know if you were on the financial part, but also with the services that do not qualify. Some of the thoughts I had on this is we're an organization that provides pet therapy, and I know it says non-therapy pets, but nowhere above in the services that qualify does it give you an indication of where that may fall. So just trying to understand in the immediate basic needs, it feels like it's so broad, and it gives some examples, but the examples don't really mix with what we know to be, what we do with the non-therapy. But as an additional to that, I heard you say the comment you just made about being a non-issue and not being penalized, the value of donated items or in-kind services. And I heard you say something to the effect of any services you offer for free to other organizations. And if you're an organization that's how you partner through other organizations and offer that service, am I missing something there that none of that would count?
I think that thank you for the question, and hopefully we can bring some clarity to this. What we're talking about, let's use the example of goods. There are things that are donated to your organization, that then you distribute out. It's that context of something's coming in for nothing, and then going out for nothing, which is a great thing overall for the charitable sector and the charitable beneficiaries of the sector. But in that context, we don't want to muddy up the water in terms of what the organization is doing from a financial perspective, like realistically. On the other hand, if let's say that there are items that are purchased by the organization in order to provide them to the charitable class of beneficiaries served by the organization, that's a different issue. That's one where the expenditures or the value of what's being provided out can be counted. Similarly, on a services basis, if I were to say go to one of your charitable organizations and say, hey, I'm a tax attorney, I've worked in the charitable sector for 20 years. I'm willing to go out and help your support the organizations that you support by providing them with some understanding of 990s and how to go about filling these things out and some of the overarching concerns and, you know, executive compensation, things like that. I'm donating my time to your organization, and then you're donating my time basically in turnkey over to your
Okay.
recipients. In that scenario, again, the organization is not paying for my services, and therefore we're not going to count that into the 50% threshold for expenditures. However, if the organization was, let's say your organization hired me as an employee, and then, you know, so I get paid, and then I am providing those services out to the class of beneficiary orgs or individuals of your organization, then in that context, that's a different scenario because there is actual expense associated with, you know, my employment.
Thank you. What if the person, their staff hired to support those who aren't being paid to deliver those services? Does that make sense?
Are
Yeah,
you
no,
maybe, is it potentially a situation, you brought up therapy pets. Are you suggesting potentially a situation where you are paying staff to train either the pets or the handler or something in those lines? Is that what you're talking about?
We actually, no, just, and I don't want to make this so much about us, but we deliver a free service to Title I schools and crisis shelters and group homes and all of that. But we do it with staff support of those volunteers. We don't pay staff to train the actual pet. The volunteer does that on their own and comes to us, and then we place them with one of these organizations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
I do apologize. I had to put on mute and let some folks know that I was facilitating a webinar, so I missed part of what you had said. Would you mind?
Yeah, can you repeat?
Yeah, so basically the way our organization works is we have staff that support a volunteer who actually goes in and delivers the service to a Title I school, crisis shelter, a group home. So how does that fit within? So the staff is paid to support them, but they're not delivering the service. Does that make sense? A volunteer is.
It does
Go ahead,
make
Craig.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It does make sense, absolutely. And I can't speak right now. We would need to take this question back and sort of talk about it internally, but I can certainly make a straight face argument that the salary associated with that it's a necessary component part of the services that are being provided
Correct.
to the eligible population.
Okay. Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
That is how, as that's, we would ask those kinds of questions. Would the service happen regardless if that staff member was not there?
Got it.
And we would have those kinds of conversations.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, sorry, there was another question in the chat. If it's all right if I move on to the next question, but I think I talked over someone.
I think it may have been me, Elaine. You're fine, please.
Okay. The next question in the chat is about preventive services and with, an example of medical and dental preventive services and whether or not they would qualify. I think the way I would answer that is, in general, medical services qualify as long as they are delivered to a qualified and eligible population. And so, there are medical services that are provided to folks who are chronically ill or physically disabled. There are also medical services delivered to folks who are low income. I have never differentiated between preventive medical and treatment medical. And so I don't know that we make the distinction. I'll wait to hear if Craig is going to correct me in any way, but if it I would not be opposed to, describing that, providing more clarity on that subject.
Thanks, Elaine. And I feel like it's a pretty clear case that preventative care is
Medical
more
care.
value per dollar than the oops, something has happened, things have gone, neglect has gone on too long, and now we've got to say replace, put implants in throughout a person's mouth, as opposed to, hey, we're going to take care of dental visits twice a year and some x-rays and fill in, fillings and crowns if needed. It's always better to engage in preventative maintenance, if you will. I think that's a clear cut, as Elena said. We don't make a distinction on that. Preventive care, I think it's fair to say it should be covered, and is.
Yeah. And so, Barb, is that, I've made a note on our notes, which we'll show you all at some point. I don't want to necessarily diverge from what we're showing here. That I've written simply clarify that preventive medical and dental care are included as medical care. So I don't have no problem with us making that clarification. And then the next question that we get is from Tina. Would mental health be considered medical? And this two-part answer to me from my perspective, and I'm going to put this out there, and Craig, you can stop me if you want to, but we believe that mental health care is medical care. However, we want to be sure that you understand that the population that you may be serving there may not qualify because of mental illness, but may qualify because of low income status. And I'm wondering, Tina, certainly, we can have this conversation here. Is what I'm saying making sense, or do you have more questions about that? Okay, so if you are, yes, in answer to your question, we've always believed that mental health care, especially that which is provided by, licensed therapists, would be considered medical care.
And Elaine, I think that was a really good way to describe the distinction. The expenditures count from the expenditure side, but it's the eligible population. Whether those expenditures can count, it depends upon how the individuals being served are qualifying. It's unfortunately, from my perspective, the statute is written in such a way that it talks about, physical issues. For talking about the populations that are eligible. But it also talks about low income. So if you have a low income individual and the services are provided, then those services expenditures are included. However, if you have a person with mental health challenges who is not low income, then those services would not be included in the 50% test. And Elaine, correct me if you think I've
Nope, you got it. And we often have those conversations with organizations who are just for absolutely valid reasons are so passionate about the population that they serve, and they want that population to qualify on their own merits. And we often try to change the conversation to get them to a population that does qualify. And it breaks our heart a little bit to do that while we're doing it, but nevertheless, we're just trying to find a way, we're asking questions to make sure that we're considering all options. If in fact the population does not immediately qualify on their own merits, we will look for, the other opportunities. We'll do the test on all of the different characteristics to make sure that we're considering all options. Okay, so the next question that I am seeing is from Karen, and it's a long one. and it's it's a long one. So if everyone can read, if everyone knows how to look in the chat, if you look in the right-hand corner, there's a little bubble and then chat. Karen is asking about the definition of immediate basic needs and how you might, get us to change, or how we might change something that is defined as an immediate basic need, with the example of mentoring programs and why it's not considered immediate basic needs. Craig, are you, let me just preface before I turn it over to Craig. That immediate basic need, that word immediate has been, is leading. It is the significant word in that phrase, the immediate basic need. And as we've gone through evaluating programs and concepts and services, we're continually drawn to that immediate, the terminology immediate. So when we are looking at a service, we are evaluating whether or not the immediacy of whether or not that service is providing something to the client that will serve them right away. And now I'll turn it over to Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. I pulled up the statute here because, it doesn't matter how many times any of us, I think, look at a statute. We've always, the best approach is always go back to the language of the statute to ensure that we are, looking at it properly and understanding it with the, correct verbiage in mind. Individuals who have a chronic illness or physical disability means individuals whose primary diagnosis is a severe physical condition that may require ongoing medical or surgical intervention.
So, Craig, we are talking about services here. The immediate, other services that meet the immediate basic need.
Thank you for that. I don't know that I have anything to add to what you had said.
Now, okay. So when it comes to listing other things that would be considered under other, there's always the option of legislative relief, or and I think that's where generally that we land. We do evaluate services under that other immediate basic need category. We evaluate new options all the time. Our go-to is to look at, to see whether or not without that service in an immediate way, would the client be in worse shape. But it has to be immediate. But so it's a strict standard, but that is what the law says. So we definitely, we would not, while we will not go to the legislature and ask for changes, folks in the industry most certainly can.
Yeah, and you may all notice as well the English language acquisition services for English language learners. There is a separate guidance document specifically with respect to these English language acquisition services that I think went live around the 17th of November, if memory serves. And that's something that I think provided some clarity, at least for some organizations in this arena, and those services, generally speaking, are viewed as counting toward the 50% expenditure threshold.
Yeah. Karen, do you have any other questions about our response here? Okay, thank you. And so we're currently out of questions unless someone has something new that they've got a new topic they'd like us to cover. Otherwise, we'll move on to financials. So I think from the standpoint of the changes that we have made in terms of financials, we did, as already discussed, we did clarify the issue of donated items in this financial section. But other than that, I am not so sure that there were any other, substantive changes to the guidelines since the last time you all saw them. We have added some, this is not new, but we did add in this part, the financials, we talked about the things that we don't want to get as financials. I was looking at some today. We really don't want to get things like check registers. We don't want bank statements. We don't want the 990. Those are just simply just not sufficient for us to go through. And so I just wanted to make sure that that's clear. It would seem to, we don't stand on a whole lot of pomp and circumstance. It doesn't have to be an audited statement. It doesn't have to be in a bound book. We just want some basic financials in order to review the financials of an organization. And we're pretty flexible with what we get, but we don't want to have to add it all up ourselves in terms of, a QuickBook report or a check register.
Yeah, I think part of our goal is, in saying what the things that we don't want is really to help streamline for you all and also for us. It's a win-win to try to, for us to provide some clarity as to what is useful for us in assessing these applicant organizations.
Okay. All right. Megan, if you want to continue on down, and maybe a little bit further. There's a little bit of information about our process, the applicant review process. I think the bottom line as you look at it is if we don't understand what we're getting, we're going to send it back. Or if the opportunity for folks to get their applications correct and complete and accurate on the first time are really in your hands. And that speeds up the process for everyone. Barb, I don't think Rory is here with us. Craig, are you familiar with whether we have any more information on the definition of pass-through orgs? Barb is asking.
Yeah, I don't believe we do at this time, but it is something that we are turning to in short order, relatively short order. Holidays coming up, obviously. It's a little bit of a wrench in timing, but we are working on it. Rory and I have talked about that.
Megan, maybe a little bit further. Any questions about provisionals? Okay.
All right, there's just one thing I do want to point out on the provisionals. Thank you, right there. The last sentence, we wanted to add to really make it clear that there can be reliance and certainty with respect to a provisional certification, at least for the period that is covered by the provisional certification. So, if there has been a provisional certification issued for, say, 2022, but then it turns out in 2023 that once everything is viewed completely, the organization doesn't qualify. Those those folks who had claimed the tax credit on their 2022 returns, we will respect that because we gave the provisional certification. Otherwise, what's the point of the provisional certification? And it would leave your donors kind of hamstrung there and probably disgruntled. And the last thing that any of us want is for them to not be as giving next year because they felt that they weren't treated fairly. So we want to avoid that situation. That's why we added that sentence.
Yeah, and for example, as we get as organizations come to us towards the end of the year and they are the perfect candidates for a provisional, we will ask them which year they want to be provisional for. Right now, it would seem silly at this point to become provisional for 2022 because in order to get on the 2023 list, we would need your full year's financials. So we now have a list of folks that will end up on the list starting on January 1st, 2023. They'll have a full year of provisionals. And then at the end of the year, we'll ask them for financials. At this point, that is where we stand as we're dealing with newly applied organizations. But sometimes folks really want to get on that provisional list right away. And then they're not able to come up with financials when we start the new year, and then there's a gap, and no one likes the gap. But that is a situation. We present the facts, and folks make choices, and sometimes we're left with a gap because of the choices that are made. Can you go forward, Megan? Any questions? Now, yeah, Megan's currently showing some of the things that are that we find that makes folks not qualify, and we're certainly willing to have conversations about any of those issues that are being presented at this point. All right. That takes us to the end of the guidelines. Are there subjects that folks would like to talk about that maybe cross over from one area to another? And you've been waiting to get to a point where it seems appropriate to talk about it?
Elaine, I had a question sent to me through chat, and since we're not talking on a specific topic right now, maybe we could address this one. It's how can we make sure that we receive notifications about these calls and changes to the QCO? We are currently a QCO, but only learned about this from the Arizona Alliance. We don't get any notification directly from the Department of Revenue.
Okay, that's a good point. I will say that that's a fair point. When we some of the contact information that we have for the organizations is so old. When we send things out to the list of contacts that we have, we get returned mail, we get returned email. We do not believe that the list of contacts that we have internally is really very good. That keeps us from using it as a resource. We do obviously have to reach out to folks when if we need provisional recertification or a overall recertification. But the amount of returned mail we get is astounding. So we can work together to change that so that in the future we could rely on the lists that we have. But what it really takes is the organizations letting us know when they move, when their contact information changes. That would be ideally how we would improve our ability to communicate with the group in general.
And Elaine, I fully agree. And Kylie has raised a question here: who would be the best person to reach out to about updating that contact information? There is the email address. It's listed in section 11 of the guidelines. It's QCO@azdor.gov.
Yep.
That's
how all contacts should be directed about the program.
Throw out the Department of Revenue. If you go to azdor.gov to the main web page, the first thing that pops up, it's a pop-up box. Immediately, you want to be kept in the know with the Department of Revenue information. You can type in your email address, and anything that gets put out onto the, for public consumption by the department, you're going to get an email notifying you that that's happening.
And I've also dropped the link into the chat there for that GovDelivery subscription. So if the box doesn't pop up, feel free to click that link and you can subscribe either with your phone number or an email address.
And I would like to make another comment about this. It's maybe a little bit of a one-off, but I think it's important. We have had organizations contact the department in general about an address change. And when you contact the department in general, they think you are a taxpayer and they will get you to change your address on your tax account. That is wholly separate from the QCO operation. And I know that is a little bit like, pointing fingers, but those changes do not make it to us. Organizations on our list, wanting to be on our list, have been on our list. All of the things that have to do with the QCO list should be directed to the QCO email. The making changes at the rest of the department is not going to filter through to us, because not all nonprofits are part of the QCO list. It is a subset, and it is kind of owned and operated by at the QCO email address. So just as a piece of advice, if you find out that anyone is struggling through that process, everything should be sent to this email address.
Yes, and to Elena, I'd like to just add to that, and this is a little bit of a sidebar, but spending 18 years in private practice, helping a lot of organizations, charitable organizations and some others, but primarily charitable organizations. The Department of Revenue is not unique to being, one of the last to know. So to speak, in terms of changes in personnel or contact folks or addresses and whatnot. The Corporation Commission is an example for, the corporations and LLCs. Often the information there I have found in my own dealings is not up to date either. And so it's just something, all of the organizations, participating in this, obviously you all are diligent, you want to get this done right. You've got great services you're providing to the charitable sector. If you're thinking about these types of issues and updating contact info, you might want to check also with the Corporation Commission, see how your information is listed there and any other state agencies you may be working with, so that you can, be operating as efficiently as possible. Just throwing it out there.
Are there other issues that you all would like to chat about? Any concerns or questions for us? All right. Well, I will say that the only comment that I've written down that we are going to follow up on in terms of the existing documents is the preventive medical dental care. I do see we have something from Barb. So Barb, I think maybe this is a question that Craig or Rory should be talking about. When we are talking about pass-throughs, I maybe you should ask us, maybe you should tell us what you mean when you're in the question that you're asking. Do you mind speaking?
No, not at all. So corporate foundations are often considered pass-throughs because taxpayers give us their donations. We qualify because 100% of our funding goes to the low-income demographic, but we are not running the programs. We are funding programs. So I'm fearful that you're eliminating pass-throughs from the tax credit program. And if a corporate foundation is considered a pass-through.
So I'll admit that I'm unfamiliar with I'm unfamiliar in general with, corporate formation terminology. So I don't know what a corporate foundation is, but I'm wondering, yeah, let me hear from Craig and Rory just to see what they have to say, if they're ready to talk about it.
So just to step back a second and frame this up a little bit, a 501c3 charitable organization by default is classified as a private foundation unless the organization meets the public support test. And there are different ways to meet that test, but the general context of this is private foundations have generally a few or only one maybe donor, and so it is it's more of an insider organization. There's not public oversight over how that charitable organization uses its funds. So without public oversight, for mass numbers of donors of more modest amounts, but instead all the money coming from a wealthy family or a corporation, because you don't have the public oversight, the donors giving to the organization that want to go in and scrutinize whether this is an organization viable, worthy of the person's dollars. The Congress wants those private foundations to be held to a little higher standard under the tax laws and treasury regulations, and then the corresponding, of course, the states can sort of piggyback off of that. Public charities, on the other hand, there's not the regulatory environment is less intrusive for public charities because Congress's theory on this is, look, there's a charitable sector that's providing great services that helps the country out overall. And there are these organizations where there are a lot of donors from across the board who are donating to these organizations, and those donors are often they're very choosy of who they're going to give their hard-earned funds to. So what they do is, what Congress says, okay, these organizations therefore are going to have some public oversight. So we're going to let the federal regulatory framework be a little looser, not looser, but less intrusive than for private foundations. But to Barb's point, private foundations they are playing a vital role in providing funding for causes, and there's very sophisticated private foundations. I've worked with many of them, really taking to task organizations that have applied for receipt of funds, and helping also educate those individuals who are leading the public charities that are actually doing they're on the ground providing these services to the eligible populations. So there's a critical need for the private foundations doing what they do. I think, Barb, my thought at this point, and Rory jump in, but I think we might want to take this issue back and kind of focus on it more specifically and see if we can provide any guidance to sort of clarify the position. And if you want to submit, say, send an email to the QCO at acdor.gov email and just with your contact information, that might be helpful for us in going through this process and try to give you provide some clarification to the charitable sector overall.
So would it be a letter kind of stating why we feel it's important to continue getting tax credits and what we do, or just general information about?
Yeah, I mean, hello, this is Rory here. Yeah, I mean, that might be good, but also maybe just describe the actual structure as well. I know we have looked into these. Some of these is, I mean, it sounds like maybe you're just maybe like the funding arm and not providing the services. Is that what you
Correct.
were saying?
Correct.
Right, which
But we're
is
funding
certainly something the department has looked into, is whether or not, the entity like that could, should qualify or could qualify.
We are a QCO right now. We've been getting funding for over 10 years or whenever the program started. And I would hate to lose the ability to reach out to our donors for this program, because it would definitely impact the amount of money we're able to put into the community. And 100% of our donations go to the underserved.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like a great organization, of course. Yeah, I mean, the challenge is sort of the 50% and our services being provided by that entity or this other entity, because I'm guessing at the higher level, at the private foundation level, probably not meeting the qualifications, but this sort of supporting arm is maybe, and that's maybe the issue.
No, I mean, the corporation can fund programs and sponsorships and things like that aren't reaching the underserved, but the foundation, I mean, Avnet, Intel, all these other large corporations, their foundations are working with the underserved in some capacity. So to not have them be eligible for the program too is disheartening.
We will take this issue back and discuss it internally, and I certainly can't promise anyone, and we can't promise anyone a definitive outcome one way or the other. We need to consider it, but you have my pledge, and that we will be looking at this, diligently, and we consider all of these issues very important, because the vital role that the charitable organization sector plays in our communities.
And another point was our 990s list out our donations and what charities and the volunteers that are on our board and making these decisions and how it's connected to our corporate entity. So that oversight is public. I mean, the information, is public from a 990 perspective.
You're saying in terms of the organizations that your organization is providing funds to?
Yes, those are listed on our 990.
Right, yes, absolutely.
Our board members, all our board members are on the 990, and so that information is public.
Yeah, and for those who may not be aware, that the issue of who is donating to the organization, that's on the Schedule B, and that's the one thing that's not required to be published by organizations pursuant to federal law. So although donors are kept private, the identities of donors to a charitable organization are kept private. The entities that are recipients of a charitable organization's funding, that, as Barbara's just said, that is public information on the Form 990, as well as directors and officers, of course.
So we have another question from Kylie. And Megan, if you wouldn't mind scrolling up a little bit to section 9. Kylie's questions is about how long does the eligibility last? There you go. If you could maybe scroll down a little, there we go. So Kylie, I'll give you a little bit of history here. The statute that we work with allows periodic recertifications. And we have, in fact, done some periodic recertifications. And some of the issues that are presented in the guidelines have come from those recertification efforts in which organizations that have been on the list for a long time and then suddenly were challenged and did not get back on the list. We found that, we really had to come forward with some more transparency about the evaluation process. There have been a number of reasons, COVID, there have been a number of reasons why we have not done recertifications in the last several years. And that's not to say that they're never going to happen again, because in fact, those that have gone through the recertification and survived, everybody, in fairness, everyone should go through that process. I mean, there's some organizations that have been on the list for since 2009. If you are subject to a recertification, we will let you know. We will send email, we will send physical mail, and we've had suggestions which we will take under consideration about sharing the list with the Alliance to make sure that they know. We will do everything that we can to make sure that we let you know. There's lots of suggestions which are under consideration about how much, how far in advance to let people know and so forth. Our goal is transparency. But yes, there will be recertifications. Yes, if you are an active participant and you have updated information with us, you will know when you're under recertification. We will, and at this point, our goal was always to do about 20% a year and once we got through the whole population at least once, the thought would be that you might be subject to recertification every 5 years or so. And we still think that that's fair. Organizations drop off, they stop, they really change their focus in order to be fair to all of the organizations on the list and making sure that all of the organizations are truly qualified. A recertification could potentially be necessary every so often. We will never recertify and pull someone off a list mid-year. It will not happen. We would not subject someone to a recertification so that, they're on the list for part of a year and then we take them off. Everything that we do is wrapped around those calendar years because those are tax years and that's important for our taxpayers. So when we do a recertification, you will know in advance. And what we will ask you to do is send us a new application and describe your services and your population and your financials. And when we approve those, you will be back on the list for the next year. If in fact we can't approve those, then you would not be back on the list for the next year. But all of that process will be laid out for you when in fact it's, your organization's turn for a recertification. Are there any other questions or comments or concerns? Um, it's Megan, Craig, should we hang on for a while? Or shall we close up?
Well, I've had a couple of people drop in the last couple minutes, so unless anyone else has any other questions, I would think we could go ahead and wrap up for the day. Craig, what say you, sir?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe just 2 or 3 minutes, just in case any other questions percolate up, but we don't need to overdo it.
In case
also,
they're typing like a mad person, you know?
I put the guidelines link into the chat. We are still taking those public comments. This is not the last opportunity that you have to make comments. They're open for public comment until I believe it is December 19th. And we can take those in writing. And you would send them to Alejandra Garcia at azdor.gov or AL Garcia.
Or QCO.
Well, no, well, you could. We would take them certainly, but the guidelines do say to send them to Alejandra directly.
Thank you.
And we thank everyone for being here today.
Yes, it's been a pleasure working with you all indirectly, most of you through Randy and just with the charitable sector in mind. I want to do it, as I've said before, everything that we can to help you guys, do what you do the good work that you do. And yeah, hopefully this is a good next step that we've taken here with you.
Thank you all for participating. We sure appreciate it.
Yeah, Megan,
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I was just going to say it's 1:41. I don't see any other questions coming in, so why don't we wrap up for the day? And just everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate all of your questions and your feedback and your comments. Again, if you have any other comments or feedback you'd like to provide, please go ahead and email those to algarcia@azdor.gov. Use the email address QCO@azdor.gov to update that contact information and for any other inquiries. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a fantastic afternoon.